Hello, good evening. Welcome to the programme. It's wonderful to be here at Leicester Cathedral on what has been, well, a fantastic day for the whole city. Those bones that were found, we've waited till now. Today was the day when they made the announcement that DNA had absolutely decided that yes, it is King Richard III. The next thing will be his reinterment, which will be here at the cathedral. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on with the canon from the cathedral here. But the press conference, well, it gathered people from right across the world, from France, from America, from Canada. It all started quite early this morning. Quentin Rayner was there, and here's his report.
At last, face to face with England's long-lost king. Seen for the first time in 527 years, this is the near-complete skeleton of the last of the Plantagenets.
That beyond reasonable doubt, the individual exhumed at Grey Friars in September 2012 is indeed Richard III, the last Plantagenet king of England.
The first ever search for the grave of a sovereign has yielded its prize. Richard III's remains were uncovered by a team of archaeologists from the University of Leicester under a council car park. It had been identified as the site of Grey Friars Church, and the king was buried in neither a coffin nor a shroud. After 5 months of exhaustive tests, the team was ready to make history. I, along with other journalists, have been allowed to see the skeleton, which is laid out in a room in the library behind me. We weren't allowed to film, and we observed the bones in silence. In all, there are 10 battle-related wounds. You can clearly see a significant injury to the back of the skull, consistent with a blow from a bladed weapon. There's also an indentation on top of the skull, thought to come from a dagger. And the spine itself is abnormal, curved from severe scoliosis, not the hunchback the Tudors would have had us believe.
In the history from the Tudors, he's ruthless, he's a tyrant, he's a serial killer. You know, and I'm afraid nothing could be further from the truth. He was nothing like that. And I think now what we're going to do, Richard III Society and the other Ricardian societies, is we're going to start getting the facts about Richard III out there.
The skeleton has been subjected to a series of rigorous tests, including CT scanning and radiocarbon dating. Crucially, ancient DNA was matched with that of Michael Ibsen, who's a 17th generation descendant of Richard III's sister, as well as matched with a distant cousin of his. So it's because you got a lovely great match?
Yeah, because I got a lovely great match between the two maternal lines and the skeletal remains. It allowed me to triangulate the results, essentially. So the fact that all three of them matched, yes, made it very convincing for me.
I'm reeling, really, to be honest. It's difficult to absorb.
Tests on the bones are likely to continue into next year, and then the remains reinterred in the cathedral in what they say will be a dignified sanctuary. Quentin Rayner, BBC East Midlands Today, Leicester.
A dignified sanctuary indeed it will be. We want to know more about that because that is what everybody's going to be talking about now. After all, it is the king, the royal connections are... Well, let me introduce you to Canon David Monteith here. Hello. What a day!
What a day. It's a great day for Leicester. So much excitement all around, and we've all been waiting for it, and we couldn't quite believe the news this morning.
I know. Now listen, the next thing obviously is the ceremony that's going to take place here. It has to be dignified. It's a royal person. Obviously there is a sadness because it is somebody's bones. But do you give us any clue of what may take place?
Well, we've got a lot of preparation to do, and we've got to work out where exactly we should inter him in the cathedral. It needs to be a place of honour and dignity, but a place that people can access very easily. And then we also need to start preparing for the service itself, which will be a service that takes place in the modern era. We'll, I'm sure, have historical references, use some medieval music and prayers appropriate to the occasion, but all that planning's yet to happen.
Now, you see, we're used to in Leicester. I mean, we had the Queen here last year and the Duchess of Cambridge. Do you see it being a huge like that?
I think it'll be a major, major occasion. Judging by the interest of the story today, I'm sure the world will want to be here. And already the emails of the cathedral suggest, people coming to ask for, could they be present? And I'm sure national figures will be here on that day.
Well, we look forward to that with great anticipation. Thank you very much indeed. It's all about King Richard III. Obviously, he's a bit of an anti-hero with regard to Shakespeare. But what's he really like? We've been having a look back at the history. Here's Luke Hanrahan.
In 1485, a fierce battle for the throne took place. After 2 hours of fighting, King Richard was dead. And the battleground was here, on fields close to Market Bosworth. Historical accounts say that Richard III's naked body was flung over a horse and taken down the road to Leicester, where it was left on show for all to see, before being buried privately. This was done to ensure that no one worshipped the dead king, that his grave didn't become a tourist attraction. Buried in an unmarked grave and forgotten about for more than 500 years, until, against the odds, he was discovered.
I think the whole thing's been surreal for months, actually. I mean, things like this don't normally happen, really. You never go looking for something as specific as a single burial. And so it all happened in the space of really like half an hour, effectively. There were all these revelations all came at once, so it's all a bit of a blur, really.
Now is the winter of our discontent.
Shakespeare's famous play clouds the true image of Richard III, painting him as a villainous, murdering hunchback. We now know for sure that he had a curved spine, but was Richard's character so bad? Deep in the archives of the university, English historians have been re-examining the historical evidence with renewed interest.
At the very end, he was offered the opportunity to escape on a swift and light horse, but he decided against it. He wanted to fight to the end.
Perhaps then history has been unkind to him, and with renewed study comes more evidence of his links with Leicester, such as this letter.
And one of the things that's interesting about this letter, from our point of view, is that there's a kind of local interest. You can see at the bottom here it is "Escrit en mon château de Leicester," written at my castle of Leicester.
A place he was happy to call home, and the place where Richard himself lay buried for 5 centuries. Now his discovery will reopen the debate that surrounds his compelling reputation. Luke Hanrahan, BBC East Midlands Today, Leicester.
You know, one wonders when this was actually laid whether anybody really and truly believed that one day the remains of King Richard III would actually come to rest here at the cathedral. Well, let me introduce you to Professor Norman Housley from the University of Leicester. And we've talked about this sort of the significance to Leicester, the archaeological significance, but historically, what does it mean?
Well, for me, personally, the most exciting aspect of the entire discovery is what it tells us about Richard's last days, because my colleagues have discovered that something in the region of 10 wounds were inflicted on the body. Now, we knew that Richard led a cavalry charge against Henry Tudor at Bosworth, but what we didn't know was the sheer violence of the melee which brought about his death, and something like 8 of those wounds were inflicted on his head.
And also then he was laying across the horse, wasn't he? Because there were wounds on his back as well.
Indeed, yes. And he was brought back to Leicester and thrown into this makeshift grave. And there was apparently no coffin, there's no sign of a shroud. And it's even possible that his hands were still tied together when he was thrown into the grave, which may even have been too small to hold him properly.
One last thing very quickly. Do you think he's as bad as he's been painted in the past?
Probably not. I mean, I work on the 15th century, and I think most of his contemporaries were neither better nor worse than he was.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for that. It's been a brilliant day. Thank you for coming here for us. Just before I hand you back to the studio, I must say that if you would like to make your own forensic examination of those bones, you can actually do that. Because if you go to the BBC Leicester News website, there's an interactive tour of the skeleton. It sounds maybe a little macabre, but it should be amazing to do. And you just go to bbc.co.uk/Leicester. Well, as I said, you'll be coming back to us at the end of the programme for a little more on this incredibly exciting day for Leicester. But for now, it's back to Dominic in the studio for the rest of the day's news.